Over $250 million in flooded cars are about to be auctioned off here in Tampa, Florida after they were hit with back-to-back hurricanes. From cars like this Ford GT that were completely underwater to ones like this GT3 RS that, as best I can tell, survived without much more than a wet carpet. And today we've came to see if any of them are worth buying. I've been coming to salvage auctions for a long time and I have never, and I truly mean never, seen anything like this. Just right off the bat, Skyline GTR, GT4, GT3 RS, R8, McLaren, another R8. I've never seen so many exotics and just cool cars, classics, everything in one area. Honestly, I don't really know where to start, so we're just gonna roll. We're just gonna walk through this entire lot. I guess first up here, the Skyline GTR, which is not something you see a lot at these auctions. This one, I'm presuming like everything else here, it is flood damaged. It looks like somebody maybe tried to protect something or at least tried to dig into it. The radiator is missing. I suppose it could have been in the state before it got flooded and sent here. You never really know. It does clearly have the wrong wheels. There's also no brakes. It only has 2 lug nuts. You know, typical Nissan stuff. At some point, this thing is sat outside for a while. You don't see a lot of these with like sunburned paint like that. The chassis itself, outside of the paint, does look good. Exhaust is rusted up a good bit. On this one, the water line right there. So it got maybe a third of the way up the door. Let's see how it looks on the inside. Oh yeah, it smells like a flood car. It definitely smells like a flood car. Also, the seat mechanism is broken if you can't tell. We got mold on the brake boot. The gear shift lever is way back, but no, it does have a transmission in it. Everything's there. Yeah, there's water damage in the speakers. You can tell it pulled up in the door panels. It's got 182,000 kilometers on it, which I guess by 90s Japanese car standards isn't really that bad. I do know traditionally that the biggest problem with these are rust, and we're not gonna get a real good look at the underbody of this, the frame rails, to see if they're all rotted out. But saltwater floods, they don't really aid in the whole rust situation. On one hand, unlike a lot of the other cars we're gonna see here today, the electronics in that one, ultra simple. You don't have to worry about any crazy modules, any dealership programming. But on the other, if it was rusty before, it's definitely rusty now. I guess to keep some semblance of organization here and not just be zooming back and forth the cars all over the place, we're just gonna go up and down the rows. So next up, this Frozen Berry Metallic, I believe it's called, Cayman GT4. It is a bit of a pink car fan myself. You guys already know I love this thing, even though it is a little paler than I'd like. Let's see, manual, that's key in these. If I were to ever get another one of these, which I really, really do want to do, it would have to be manual. I rebuilt one of these a few years ago, but I wasn't at all in a financial position to keep it, so we ended up auctioning it off afterwards, and I've regretted it ever since. If I do have to pick this car apart in one way, it's definitely the seats. These are what you call the couch seats. These cars were also offered with a carbon bucket seat option, and they are the best seats ever put in a car, period, bar none. Yeah, that is just my opinion, but I will argue it. Body-wise though, as is the case with a lot of the flood cars here, this thing is just mint. And I mean it, absolutely mint. If you sprayed this thing off, took the salvage auction stickers off of it, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was ever in a flood event. Now that doesn't mean that everything's gonna be smooth sailing to rebuild it, because the water line, it came up to, well, right about there. That isn't that high, but unlike that Skyline up there, they do have a lot of advanced electronics, and it wouldn't be fun to replace all those wiring harnesses and have all that stuff programmed. Now, another major concern when it comes to the Caymans and the 911s when they're flooded is their horizontally opposed engines, meaning the exhaust, it's fairly low. It doesn't take a lot for water to get into the exhaust and backfeed its way all the way up into the engine, and it could have happened with a water line as low as that one. One other very important note about this GT4, and it's unfortunately something we're gonna see a lot today, is how raw of a deal it got from the state of Florida. For some reason, Florida decides to give a lot of these flood cars certificates of destructions, meaning they can never be registered again in the US. On cars that are flooded to the roof, I get it, I totally understand. But cars that have 6 inches of water in them, it just doesn't make any sense to me, and it seems like it's very needlessly just making a lot of cars unusable. But if we're gonna get into things that don't make sense about the government, we'd be here all day, so let's keep it moving. We got a base C8, a Bentley Bentayga G63, and then the biggest frickin' truck I've seen in my entire life. When I walked into the lot this morning, I just saw this thing towering over everything else. It had me interested, and now I'm even more interested. And that's because it's a Shelby Super Baja, which I have never seen until right now. Not on the road, not at a dealer. I've never seen one. I can't even recall seeing one online. The water line on this thing, while it would have engulfed most other cars, it is right at the floorboard, so I'd have to imagine this is a very, very easy fix. Beautiful interior. The Carroll Shelby signature there with the VIN number. I don't know anything about the drivetrain on these. I'd have to assume it's probably supercharged. Either that or I suppose it could be diesel. God. Okay, so it's a diesel. As best I can tell, this looks pretty well stock. I was hoping that this thing had, I don't know, like a Predator engine in it. And for reference, the hood is up to my shoulders. Impressive, very impressive. In front of it, we got the Ferrari 360, which, again, it feels so weird to say stuff like this, but by everything else we've seen here and the stuff we're gonna see later, it's just kind of run-of-the-mill. It's crazy because they are really cool cars. I mean, it is the F1 gearbox, not gated manual, so yeah, you know, we'll just shut it. The Lamborghini Urus, something I've never really considered wanting, but this one, if there were one, it's this. Not only is it a beautiful green color, I may be wrong about this, but I think it's called Verde Ithaca, if it's the same one as the Huracans and the Aventadors and whatnot, but this one has some Mansory touches. I see the mirrors on there. I'm assuming a lot of this carbon aero is Mansory. On the inside, wow. That is the one thing they got really right on these cars. The interior color combos, they did some wild stuff. All this green leather, green stitching, it just looks so cool. But I don't see anything in here that's Mansory specific. And I do see that they've went hardcore at cleaning this car, but there are some things that you really can't clean off. The seat rails, the rod that the motors slide back and forth on, that's all rusted up. You can see it in the pedals. So this definitely got water up at least decently high. Let's see what's going on under the hood. Well, it looks very stock. And it could just be dirt. You never really know. It could just be from rain, I suppose. But there does look like there's some nastiness on top of that valve cover. Again, ooh. That ECU. That is gritty, grimy, it feels salty. This one, I don't believe, has a water line marked on it unless it's this. But I thought this was like paint transfer. I thought it got scraped. Maybe that is where they marked the water line. We got the Ferrari 458 next to it. If you look at the hardware on the carbon ceramic brakes, they're all rusted up, so you know water got above that. You got, let's see. Ooh, look down there at the battery area. Nasty. The seats, they have mold on them. Don't see a water line on this one either, but it obviously got quite high. The inside of the exhaust completely rusted up. Let's see under the hood. It's nothing egregious. If you look at the exhaust, there's really no rust on it. This one's a bit hard to tell. This is one that you really needed a water line on to be able to know. We got the 911 turbo here. Water line on this one right there, right under the intake scoop for the intercoolers. You got, we have a FL2K, which is a big race event down here, an awesome event. 2023 parking pass. Oh, red interior that is just worn out now. Red on white, so good. I bet this car looked awesome before, you know, this. It is a Turbo S. It is such a shame. Now, if I had to guess, I haven't looked this up yet. Based on the water line, I would assume this one probably got a certificate of destruction. This car got a certificate of salvage, rebuildable flood, and that GT4 got a certificate of destruction. Make that make sense. I really cannot. If one of you guys knows the rhyme or reason why Florida does things the way they do, please let me know. I'm genuinely curious. We got some cool little custom buggy here. This is also something that I think would be really hard to be affected by a flood. Other than the engine, I feel like if I owned one of these and it got flooded, I'd just rebuild it, but I do understand why, if you got a bunch of money into it and you can get insurance payout on it, why you would let it go. Either way. Over here, the GT3 RS, chalk, a very low water line on it too. I'm well aware this isn't by any means a hot take or anything, being that everybody loves these cars, but God, they are just so good. I told you earlier when we were looking at that GT4 that they offer carbon bucket seats. These are those seats, and again, they are just phenomenal. And maybe it's my rose-colored Porsche glasses on here, but this thing don't even smell bad inside. It smells great. There's not a lick of body damage on it, except a grill that's been pushed out, a front lip, but that could be from being towed. You never really know. The waterline on this one is about the same as that GT4, if not a little bit lower. Again, the main question on this one is, how bad are the electronics? How hard is it going to be to buy them and program them? And did the engine get water in it? You know the exhaust got water in it. There's still rocks. It's part of the seafloor right there. It's got the beautiful carbon fiber roof. It's just so weird to see one of these cars at auction and have it look not at all wrecked, not even damaged. But that in itself presents a big problem. Let's say you or I wanted to buy this car. We take into account everything that could be wrong and try to price it accurately. Could it need an engine rebuild? Yes. Could you have to spend $20,000 at the dealer to try to get all this stuff programmed? Absolutely. Now, we might total all that up. We might say, okay, this is what a rebuilt one should go for price-wise. Let's knock off the price of all that stuff we just talked about. That's what you pay for the car. Sounds like solid logic, makes a ton of sense, right? Well, not everybody thinks that way. Chances are that no matter how you can get to a reasonable conclusion about what you should pay for that thing, somebody's gonna pay significantly more. Now, there are plenty of innocent reasons why that happens. Maybe somebody underestimates what it would cost to fix. Maybe somebody just doesn't know. Or maybe they just get googly eyes when they see a GT3 RS like someone we all know. But something else that also very unfortunately plays into it is theft cars. People will steal them. They'll need to rebody it. They might have all the parts already sat around ready to go and something like that, and they'll pay basically whatever it takes because they know that they can pay more for it than you or I can. So you do have to kind of pick and choose and realize that a lot of these cars are going to pass you up. But when the time comes, one will slip by, and that's when you make a move on it. But moving on, we got the V10 R8 here, convertible, and being that this one's completely taped up on the top, I'm not going to pull that off because it'll probably be a pain for the Copart guys to get that back on. It's a very low water line. So this really falls into the categories. Most of the other exotics, it's probably going to be a pain to get or repair all the parts you need, but really it shouldn't be that bad of a fix. And we've got the McLaren Arturo, I believe they're called. Also very, very low water line. Just like the R8, the windows on this one are stuck down, so we're not really going to dig into it too much, especially since I'm not personally in the market to buy one, so we'll keep it moving. We have an R8 Coupe, black, another just beautiful car. Black interior, red stitching. Oh, it actually smells pretty nice inside. This is one of the better smelling cars I've opened the door to today. Wow, that is high. Looking in at the exhaust and everything, this is, if there's one we're going to question here today, I think it might be this. I really don't know if this thing got halfway up the door, 2/3 of the way up the door. That would have meant half the seats were covered. Next to our R8, we got a 300ZX, which is a bit out of place given the company it's next to. It's still a really cool car. I actually really do like these things. Behind it, we got the, is it a Gen 1 or Gen 2? I think, because of the hood, it's a Gen 2 Viper RT10. Yes, 2001 Viper RT10. That is a shame. 8,082 miles. This was a South Florida collector car through and through, and forgive me for this one, but it just got snake bit. Super low waterline, really not much could have happened to this. Again, these are ultra simple cars, being in the 90s, or in this case an 01, but it's basically a 90s car, let's be real. Again, I don't want to rip all this stuff off. We'll peel it back and take a little peek though. It's got the brown interior. And it looks minty still, which makes sense given the waterline. As far as RT10s go, man, it's hard to beat this one. It's really hard to beat it. This one's a Gen 3, and this one also only has 8,000 miles, though it has a slightly higher amount of miles than the RT10 up there. Oh, it's got electronic door locks and no power, so we're kind of screwed on that one. We can, however, look under the hood. This thing, though, again, just like the RT10 right here, is absolutely beautiful. These headlights are worth an incredible amount of money. I just rebuilt one of these things, and none of that stuff was cheap at all. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You know, this is just a hunch. Who knows if it's actually true? 8,000 mile Viper. 8,000 mile Viper. They're right next to each other. I wonder if they came out of like the same collection. I suppose that would be possible. Now, unlike the RT10, this does have the side exit exhaust. You can see that's all rusted up. That got full of water. What else do we have? Oh, we might have a really high water line on this one, at least in the back end. Either that or the taillight doesn't seal because there's a lot of condensation in there. Because judging by the engine, the water line wasn't that high. On the inside, it's really hard to see, but that doesn't look bad either. We got the Rolls-Royce, another Rolls-Royce. And then we have probably the best two cars we're gonna see. At least in this group of cars. We have a whole nother ball game over there. We got the Aventador SV and a Ford GT. Now, as crazy as this is, because I never expected to see one Ford GT at the salvage auction, this is the second red Ford GT I've seen at Copart in the past year. Frankly, the last one was wrecked so bad that this one could have been flooded over the roof and it'd still be worlds better, which is quite ironic because it nearly did get flooded above the roof. I mean, I'm slightly exaggerating there, but not really. The only thing that didn't get underwater in this car, assuming that water line is right, is the glass, the top of the seats, the headliner, and maybe, just maybe, that supercharger. But if the engine's full of water, the supercharger's the least of our concerns. These cars are so far and few in between where I'm from on the road, unless you're maybe to Cars and Coffee or something, that you really never see them. So to see one that's complete, even if it's in this state, it's just such a beautiful car. On the inside though, let's see how beautiful that is considering the water line. Wow, look at the shifter. The shifter's rusted. So at the very least, it did get above that. The water line, unfortunately, very unfortunately, is not lying on this car. Overall, I guess because they're very simple cars, it doesn't look that bad, but I can't imagine that anything is simple, easy, or cheap to replace in this. It just can't be. If it did truly get flooded that high, the only thing that might have saved the engine, maybe, and that's a hard maybe, is the fact that the exhaust loops up and around. You'd really have to cross your fingers that it didn't get that high, even if it got to like right there, but didn't get high enough to loop over and then go up into the cylinder head. You gotta assume, based on the $300,000 this thing's probably gonna go for, that somebody's gonna buy it and try to restore it to factory original. But if there was ever a time where you could get a Ford GT chassis and try to do something unique with it, a swap, or just do like something ridiculous, this is that time. Now, next up on the list of just asinine cars that we're seeing here, an Aventador SV, and this is listed on Copart's site with a value of above $500,000. I tend to not pay a ton of attention to cars that are significantly outside of my budget, so I can't tell you production numbers, I can't tell you all the specs on something like this. I can just tell you that it looks freaking awesome, and I know anything that says SV on it is super special. And all the bodywork is just so outlandish and wild. The spoiler, the rear diffuser, all these arches and contours to the bumper. It's so ridiculous looking, but that's what makes an SV cool, right? It's got center lock wheels, the black and red, and the water line on this one, very bottom of the door. Again, on a Lambo like this, it's probably gonna have already caused a ton of damage. Carbon fiber door panels. Now, one of the Lambos that I'm a big fan of, the Gallardo Superleggera, that also has carbon fiber door panels, though it's not a $500,000 car, it's more like $150. Carbon floors, carbon fiber, everything. I guess that's probably the main tub of the car, the console, everything. The whole tub's carbon fiber. This might be the most carbon fiber I've ever seen on a car. Even as somebody who's not the biggest Lambo fan, seeing SV, that means something to me. That's special. It is very, very cool. And it's unique to be able to lay eyes on one of these, even at a salvage auction. Now, I have to imagine that's aftermarket. That's kind of wild that somebody put a big, massive sub right in between the seats on this. I didn't really expect that in there. Let's go ahead and shut that very gently because we can't pay for it if we break anything. Just on these two cars alone, I can't even imagine the beating the insurance companies took, which of course means all of our rates are about to go up. If only there was a easy way to save money on your car insurance. And yeah, this is going exactly where you think it is. With Insurify, the sponsor of today's video, you could slash your insurance bill in half, all while maintaining the same or getting even better coverage. Insurify makes the insurance companies compete for your business, meaning they're gonna hit you with their best offer right off the jump, even if they just had to pay out on all these cars. It truly is the fast, free, and transparent way to shop around for insurance. You just answer a few quick questions about yourself and your vehicle usage, enter a few details about your car, and boom, Insurify shows you all your available offers. Not only is Insurify gonna get you the best rate possible, but they make it so you can be insured in minutes, which means no more sitting on the phone with an insurance agent for half an hour. Which I do have to say really comes in handy when you find yourself on one of those late night runs to buy a project car that you definitely shouldn't be buying, only to realize that you forgot to put insurance on it and you can't drive it home. Head down to the link in the description and see what Insurify can do for you and make the insurance companies work for your business. Now back to it, the Alpha 4C. This is one of the most, I don't know if I'd say underrated, but at least underappreciated cars out there. I don't see these things getting any love outside of hardcore purists, just like the Aventador, the Tubbs carbon fiber, on a car that you can get for 1/10 of the price of the Aventador. It's all just very, very cool to me. Now, I don't know a lot about the specs, but to me, they're almost like the Lotus Elise. They're just one of those cars that's so small, cool, awesome. You know, just by looking at the thing, you know it handles really well. Thus far, I haven't put serious thought into buying one, and if I did, I'd probably want to do something stupid with it, like an engine swap, maybe a Turbo K Series or something. But I'd say sooner than later, we probably find ourselves build one of those. Prowler, which at the time when they came out, I think I probably speak for everybody, they were not a liked car. It wasn't really well received. I thought they were ugly back then. I just think it's cool that Chrysler did something like this and made it a production car. It's not something they would at all do now. Maybe, just maybe, if the right one of these ever comes along, I'll buy it and put a Hellcat engine in it. If somebody hasn't already done it, which I suppose is probably pretty likely on one of these. We got the old school Roadrunner, which I'm just gonna guess off the top of my head is a 1974, you know, wild guess. Yep. Looks like a 364 barrel. I've said it before, I don't really know a ton about the old school Mopar engines. To me, it just needs a Hellcat. I know people get touchy about swapping the old cars, but what's not better with a supercharged 6.2 in it? We got the Pontiac Le Mans. We have another vet over there. What's that, Galaxy, I believe. Yeah, I always confuse these with Fairlanes until you see how big they are. This is another car like that Caddy that just looks cool, has some custom touches. You can tell just by the brakes though how much water this one got. Safe to say the water line's over that, even if it's not marked. Only 38,000 miles on it. Wow. Beautiful, or at least it was. When it comes to these mass flood events, I almost feel worse about the classic cars like this, even if they're not as expensive as the newer ones like the Porsches, because they're not making any more of these. The factory can produce another GT3 anytime it wants, but every time something like that rolls in here, it's done. There's no more coming. Up here in the front corner, we got a Carrera 4, which was a convertible, has the factory hardtop on it. This is the RT10 Generation 1, which is basically the same car as that Gen 2. You can see the difference in the hood. You can see the difference. This has the side exit exhaust, whereas the Gen 2 RT10 had a rear exit exhaust. This one also doesn't have windows. That's plastic. This should belongs on a boat. It genuinely belongs on a boat. Otherwise, still very, very cool cars. The Gen 1s really tend to not get love on a public scale. Again, it's all about that Gen 2 GTS. Now, I did pass right over this because, well, obviously I did, right? I don't know what this thing is, but it looks awesome. It looks like something somebody could be taken to jail in, but also looks like an awesome work truck slash parts hauler slash whatever you want to do with it. It just looks freaking cool. And this wouldn't look nearly as cool if they didn't have it dumped on these wheels. Oh yeah. Awesome. A Willwood brake pedal. The wheels are turning here though. Think of all the stuff you could do with something like this. There's so much. I mean, a Hellcat swap, a red eye swap, a demon swap. The possibilities are endless. All jokes aside though, not that I was really joking, this would be an awesome parts hauler, something to take with you to the track. There really are a ton of possibilities with this outside of the whole swap thing. We got a brand new GT500, and these are intriguing to me even when they're flooded like this. as I'm wondering how much you could just interchange with a Mustang GT. This one smells great, looks great. Waterline super low. You can see, just like that other car, the rod on the seat rail, that's all rusted up. So they did an excellent job cleaning this. You'd hope that that preserves things, although it's not really gonna help with the important stuff like wiring and modules. But given the waterline, there's not a chance that any of the drivetrain or engine's damaged with this. I tend to think this is gonna pull a lot of money, but it's also gotta be a very easy fix. We got a Ferrari F8 in a beautiful, I mean beautiful dark blue color. Let's check out the inside of this one. Not the best smelling, but also not terrible. You can see there's like hints of mold on the side of that seat. The carpet's pretty trashy. It doesn't really look like water got into the center console or door panel pocket. So it may have been a little bit lower than that. Either that or, again, they did a really, really nice job cleaning this thing up. Just like everything else we've seen here, the chassis, the paint, the body, it's all so beautiful. The exhaust is rusted up. I tend to believe, though, with that water line, it probably just got the tips. I really don't think there's any way it got into the engine. Up here, we got a 458 to older Maserati. The last car in this group, before we go over to the next group, the silver Gallardo. Based on the headlights, the taillights, this is a late model Gallardo, which I do think is pretty awesome. They are one of my favorite Lambos. I know the Huracans and the Aventadors are like the new hotness, but there's something really cool about these. Ooh. No seats. Performante, I suppose, is pretty similar to the Superleggera. The carbon door panels, carbon console. Beautiful interior that really does not smell bad at all. Everything in here is actually really nice. Orange stitching all over. Leave it to Lamborghini, by the way, to make a silver that actually looks good. Even dirty like this, there's something about the way it hits in the sunlight that's just nice. To me, everything about these last year or two Gallardos are just awesome. For me, it's that perfect blend of semi-obtainable Lamborghini in the Gallardo with updates that make it just a little closer to the ones that aren't as obtainable. And speaking of not obtainable Lamborghinis, we might as well head on right over to the other Performante. This thing, the Huracan Performante, is peak Lamborghini. Other than maybe the STO Huracan, this is far and away my favorite Lamborghini of all time, especially in this blue, the bronze wheels too, just absolute perfection. Ultra low waterline. Let's see how she looks on the inside. Oh, so good. So good. Oh, first and foremost, there's that rusted seat rail. It's crazy how these mount. They're more akin to like an aftermarket bucket seat than they are a production car seat. And you see a lot of the carbon fiber on this car on the interior. It's all that forged stuff. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I prefer the traditional looking carbon fiber, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? These seats, these are right up there on par with the Porsche carbon bucket seats. These are carbon frame as well. It's really kind of hard to see what's going on in the engine bay of these. You can see the exhaust does have some type of rust in it, which doesn't really match with that waterline. But I suppose that could come from sitting, it could come from rain, because if that waterline is to be believed, it certainly didn't get this high. Now, as most of you guys know, I haven't really got into the whole exotic thing. Someone who'd rather have like 8 American and Japanese pieces of junk than one really expensive exotic, but who knows? Maybe one day we kind of get the itch to do that and we sell off a lot of the other stuff and try to rebuild something like this. Now, moving on to slightly more affordable European cars, the 718 Spider. This is, for all intents and purposes, a GT4, but a Boxster, not a Cayman, meaning it has the convertible top, but everything about it is identical to the GT4. Now, this one, it looks like it's just wreck damage, but there's also signs of a flood. So who knows if this thing got flooded and then maybe got pulled out of somewhere. Yeah, I would say this is probably a flood car. Just a guess. If I had to bet money on it, I'd say it's a flood car. Really though, this thing is absolutely disgusting. Absolutely. This had to have been up here. Wow. Brutal. Look at the taillights. Full of, like, that's practically an aquarium if it didn't bust open. At this point, all this thing's good for is probably replacement body panels for another one of these if you bought one that was just straight wrecked. And even then, a lot of those didn't really make it out too well. One thing that's kind of funny here, headlights, they're perfectly fine. Though I guess I wouldn't call this one perfectly fine. But what I mean is they don't have water in them like the taillights do. So maybe this thing sat that way, down in water, who knows? We got an LC500, a Bentley, an Aston, some type of Mercedes SUV. All the luxury European stuff, the big kind of bulky cars that I'm not really a fan of. But here we've got an older Gallardo, and this will be the perfect opportunity to really show you guys what the difference is between the early Gallardos and the late one, like the silver one we saw earlier. There's all the obvious stuff like the wheels, the headlights, the taillights, all the body work. And then there's the interior, which is significantly more dated on these. Not that they're bad looking by any means, and I'm sure a lot of this is because they don't have the carbon seats and all the crazy stuff from a flood front. Yeah, it is exactly what you would expect considering that. And of course, given that the water line was above the motor, let's just assume this is a fish tank as well. This thing's probably full of water top to bottom. It was definitely a beautiful car, but that water line, that is a tough rebuild. I know red's the traditional Ferrari color, but if I had one of these old school Ferraris like this, yellow is a winner. Yellow, black, they all look awesome. I know the traditional Ferrari guys might not agree, but red is not the best color on Ferraris. Let's see, pedals, trashed. That whole area over there where the battery is, trashed. Wow, look at the modules in the back. That is one crusty Ferrari. The seats, well, they were really worn out before that. Let's see, where did they mark a water line on this thing? That should tell us a lot. One thing I will say about the 430s, they look good in the front. It was a significant step up from the 360s, at least in my opinion. I don't see a water line on it, which means we're gonna have to make our own conclusions. And unfortunately, on this one, it's not gonna be a good one. Best I can see in the engine bay, there's nothing that really suggests water got on top of it. Look at that brake pedal. It might not show up great on camera, but you can see it pretty clearly in person. There's corrosion halfway up it. I think that is where our water line is. And if that is the case, that's really not the worst thing in the world. It's better than a lot of the cars we've seen today. We've got another Ferrari F8 2023. Look at the brakes. The rear brakes are bigger than most of the cars I've ever owned front brakes. Wow. Considering the water line was halfway up the door on the other side, they either got it very wrong or did heavy cleaning on this one. I mean heavy. An old Mach 1 in a sick green color. This is something that you just don't see at the auctions. Oh man, that's brutal. Look at the gauges. It had to be almost all the way underwater. I mean, you see exactly, I guess, how high it got. That's insanity. So that means seats done, shifter assembly done, door panel. Yep, it got in there. Unfortunately, one and only one of the hood latches is seized up. But at least from the exterior, this thing still looks so cool. This would be an awesome project, especially if they accurately reflected the water line on it somewhere, which theoretically would mean that people would pay less money for it. But I don't see that they did on this one. So given the way it looks on the outside, I assume it's going to go for a ton of money. But man, imagine buying something like this and using the chassis exactly as it is and putting an awesome engine in it. Now this C8Z, this is one we're definitely going to take a look at because it's got everything, including the carbon fiber wheels. It's got the big carbon fiber spoiler. Let's see what the inside looks like. Oh, such a good combo. So good. It has all the carbon fiber trim. You'd be hard pressed to find another C8 Z06 that's this well spec'd. And as far as the water line goes, I guess that's it, I suppose. Even though, again, if it did get that high, they did such a ridiculously good job of cleaning this all up. You can see a little bit of mold on the airbag behind the seats, but from what you can see, I guess, which makes sense because they want the auction pictures to look good, they made it look real nice. Now, as far as Corvettes go, the C8 Z06 is probably the most technologically advanced, which means it's probably going to be a hard rebuild, but it's still a Corvette. There's another Rolls, another Aston, a base C8, a Bentley, another base C8, another Ferrari, a very minty white 992 GT3. Let's see how she looks inside. Oh, it's manual. And that's the best part about having a GT3 versus the GT3 RS. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to deny that the RS is the better car, but the fact that you can get a regular GT3 and still get it in a manual, how can you beat that, right? It doesn't have the cool seats, the carbon buckets, but otherwise, red stitching everywhere. Very nicely spec'd car. And just like some of the other ones we've seen, they've done a lot of cleaning in here. You can tell everything's just kind of leather conditioned. But again, look at those pedals. That's going to be the tell. Look at that fuse box. There's barnacles on it basically. And it at least got to the top of the pedals, which the top of the pedals, the exhaust ports on the engine, they are very, very close to each other. So that is a bit scary. This is one of those cases where they've done such a ridiculously good job of cleaning it up that I think unless somebody comes here and looks at this in person, they might not know what they're in for when they buy it. Now we got the previous generation GT3, the 991. Once again, let's peel her back, see what she's hiding inside. We can use our half of a door handle. Whoa, that one, that hits you right away. That's like a kick to the teeth. I mean, whew. Okay, so they didn't clean this one, and it smells that way. It's bad. You can see, I guess, the water line where it started and then maybe went down and down and down. Either that or up, up, up. I don't know which way it was going, but it definitely got high. If water got that high in this car, the engine's full. This one is rough. The headlight, fishbowled. This headlight fishbowled as well. There is mud, sand, everything down in the front bumper. I do think 99% of the cars we've seen here today are getting rebuilt, but one like this, it might be best suited for a parts car. And when I say parts car, I mean everything's coming apart. The engine, that's probably getting parted out, or maybe somebody will try to rebuild it. Who knows? But this thing is just, it's whacked all over. They did a lot of damage pulling it out from wherever it was. Look at the hardware. This thing went for a swim. That honestly might take the crown for the worst one we've seen here today. Now, next up on the list that has gotten just far longer than I ever imagined a list at a salvage auction could be, a 720S, or at least I think it's it's a 720S. We've seen so many cars here today that they're all just running together at this point. They all look great from the outside, but it's the inside that counts and whatnot. Every time I open one of these cars, I'm just doing a small sniff to know what I'm in for. This one's really not that bad, though it looks like it should be. Obviously, the interior color scheme is just awesome, but it is not without its issues. This is going to be a tough fix. From what I hear, McLarens already have issues when it comes to the electronics. This certainly will not help that. But there is a pretty huge silver lining here in that the body is in phenomenal shape. If they had to drag it out of something, they at least did a very good job. They were careful with it. The front bumper, yeah, that's about it. So some of the carbon on the front bumper's jacked up. There's some, what I believe might be PPF peeling off. But hey, compared to what we just saw, really can't complain about it. Truly, this McLaren sums it all up pretty well. Like a lot of the flood cars we've seen today, and a lot of the flood cars across the nation, if you're shopping for one, they might look awesome, but once you get inside, they got problems. Now, we have been here from pretty much open till close, which happens in about 10 minutes from now. We've seen a mind-numbing amount of cars. Usually when we come out to these lots, we see everything that's worth seeing, and that really didn't happen here today. We saw all the best stuff, but there's definitely more here. We're gonna catch a plane back to Maryland tonight, and hopefully the next time you see me, something here is gonna be in the shop. Well, we did buy something, it just wasn't one of those cars. Like 2 days after we got back from the lot in Tampa, this Python Green GT4 came up for auction at an obscure Copart in the middle of North Carolina, and well, here it is. I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want to spoil anything for when we do the actual build series, but the last GT4 I had, that was silver, and that was the only thing I had to complain about with the car. Python Green, it's one of my favorite Porsche colors, period, much less on a GT4, and this one's just the perfect rebuilder. Most of the cars we saw down there don't even have an auction date yet, and while I did really want to see what some of them went for and hopefully buy one or two, I just really could not help myself on this one. But hey, this is just how the salvage game works sometimes. You do a ton of research, do all the legwork, travel to a lot to check out a bunch of cars, and then end up with something else completely. But trust me, I am more than okay with it this time.